William Bruzzo is a former JAG attorney joining me now from Santa Ana, California via Skype. Thank you so much for being with us. So Bergdahl's defense has claimed the president has unfairly swayed the court with the comments he's made about the case. Mr. Trump, as you know, as a candidate, repeatedly called Bergdahl a traitor, and he was asked about it just last week. Here's what he said.
Do you believe that your comments in any way affected Bowe Bergdahl's ability to receive a fair trial? And can you respond to his attorney's
Well, I can't comment
that...
on Bowe Bergdahl because he's, as you know, I guess he's doing something today, as we know, and he's also they're setting up sentencing. So I'm not going to comment on him. But
So he didn't comment this time, but he has in the past. Is this a valid claim by the defense that President Trump's previous comments might sway the sentencing?
Absolutely. It's a real problem. It's called undue command influence. And basically, anytime someone in a high position of authority makes some comment that's detrimental to the accused, the defendant, in this case, Mr. Bergdahl, it can influence the jury pool, obviously. So it's a real problem. In this case, it's the actual president, who's the commander-in-chief, who literally has authority over everyone, including the military jurors in this case. Here's the other thing. There's a 10,000-pound elephant in the room here. The president, or the president-elect, when he made those comments, had incomplete information. He didn't know, I assume, that Bergdahl actually had some mental health issues prior to going into the Army, and he'd actually washed out of the Coast Guard for those issues after less than 30 days. So he acted commiserate with those mental health issues, in my view, when he left his post in an unauthorized manner.
So in a normal jury trial, what might happen when you have this kind of argument by the defense is, for example, they might move the case to another jurisdiction, right? What will happen in military proceedings that's different from civilian courts if the defense and the judge does hear the defense's point on this?
It's a very good question, because the problem is, President Trump is the commander-in-chief no matter where he goes. If they hold the trial in Japan or, wherever they hold it, a military base in a foreign country, he's still the commander-in-chief. So he has complete authority over everyone. And that's why I believe the only real solution to this is to dismiss the case. And so far, this judge has ruled against defense efforts. And I've never heard of a situation where the commander-in-chief has made this kind of condemning statements about an accused. But I believe that the only real solution is to dismiss it. I doubt that the trial judge will do that, but on appeal, maybe that would be Bergdahl's best option.
But during sentencing, a dismissal is possible under this military justice system?
No. The undue command influence issues were brought up prior to Sergeant Bergdahl actually pleading guilty, and they were denied by the court, which is not unusual. I mean, you can imagine dismissing a case like this, even though I think it would probably be merited, is going to be very, very difficult for a trial judge to do.
Bergdahl gave an interview to Britain's Sunday Times where he describes in detail what he experienced in Taliban captivity. Would you expect his 5 years in captivity to win him any lenience from the judge?
Absolutely. Here's the thing about this, and this is President-elect Trump described him as a traitor, as a bad person. This is not the case. This is a young man who wanted to serve his country at a time when people at the very highest levels of our government have done everything possible not to serve. This young man tried not once, but twice to serve his country. This is an individual who I think through just some sort of mental defect, a personality disorder, I think is how he was diagnosed, walked away from his post to do this cockamamie thing where he was going to, traipse across the Taliban countryside. He left his weapon with the unit, which is military protocol, and went unarmed into the countryside to report a leadership problem at his base. For someone to do that is simply ridiculous. And to me, it shows that there was something wrong with him at the time.
Not everyone is as sympathetic, obviously, to Bowe Bergdahl. If you were his defense attorney at this point, which tack would you take?
I think his best defense is to say, listen, the Army knew that this guy had issues before he joined up. It was documented in his negative discharge from the Coast Guard. Listen, what they had to do to get him in the Army was they had to go up to the headquarters of the Army and ask for a waiver because he most certainly did not get a reenlistment code of 1. If you don't get a reenlistment code of 1, you cannot reenlist in another service. So they would have had to gone up to the chain of command, high to the headquarters of the Army, and get a waiver. They knew about this guy at the time. The war was very unpopular. They were having a hard time getting people to enlist. And apparently, according to news reports I've read, about 20% of the people recruited that year in 2008 received some kind of waiver. That's a huge number.
Sounds like a bigger story that should be investigated. William Bruzzo, a former JAG attorney, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.